also providing some recommendation. And we've really directly been inspired by the conclusions and the recommendation from EFIG to set up and initiate our strategy and initiatives around energy efficiency financing. EFIG is particularly now also involved in the last pillar that I was discussing about de-risking, and that's the next slide. So to come back on this pillar, de-risking is really to launch specific activities to convince that financial institution that there is a win-win situation. A win-win situation for project developers, for public authorities, for the economy as a whole, but also for financiers and investors. Because we believe lending to energy efficiency leads to more reliable cash flow, to increase asset value by benefiting from the green value or the less brown discount for the buildings. So it overall leads to risk reduction, and it provides increased business opportunities for financiers and investors. I again would like to recall these figures of 177 billion euro per year of investment related to energy that we estimate as an impact of the package that we are currently proposing. And we also see the importance of the refinancing also opportunities. If we are able to create portfolio of energy efficiency loans tagged as being energy efficiency, this will clearly create interesting opportunities for investors for refinancing. So to support that change in the market, that change of perception, we need, of course, evidence, and that's why we're working together with EFIG on that at the moment with two specific projects or actions. The first one is the DEEP platform, which is a platform that discloses the real technical and financial performance of projects of more than 7,000 projects across Europe. It's just the beginning, but so it gives an evidence that basically energy efficiency projects have in general like quick return in industry. Somehow it's more diverse in the building if it's shallow renovation or in-depth renovation. So it gives some evidence to the market actors as regard the real risk profile of energy efficiency project. And the second actions that we are launching on the 22nd of June is the deployment, the launch of a specific underwriting toolkit that will help and support financiers, banks, and investors in their process, in their assessment of the risk and benefits of energy efficiency investments. And yeah, on EFIG, what I wanted also to mention, of course, is that the participation of banks is absolutely essential for us, is key. So if you are not already participating to EFIG, and if you feel that you have an interest in participating to that group, feel free to send me an email or to contact via Paula us, and we'll be happy to include you in the group. And just to finalize my presentation on slide 8, I also wanted to introduce another actions that we have launched a couple of months ago, which is the Sustainable Energy Investment Forums. Clearly, if we want to progress on the 3 pillars of the initiative, so in terms of better use of public funds, in terms of support to project developers, and in terms of de-risking, we need to exchange knowledge. We need to exchange good practices in Europe, and we need to have all the market actors around the same table to engage into discussion. And to achieve that, we have launched a series of events called Sustainable Energy Investment Forums that engage dialogue with financial sectors, public authorities, and energy efficiency experts. So far, we have organized around 6 meetings. There will be the next meeting is on the 15th of June, so this week in Madrid, covering Spain and Portugal. You will, I guess, have the presentation, and you can then click on the different events, and if you click on them, then you have access to all the materials that were presented. I would very much call you to basically be involved when you have such an event organized in your member state. That's very important for us, and I guess also very important for you. and it's really an important source of key information for all market actors. So yeah, please follow that strand of work and be involved. We really need your involvement. And with that, I would like to close my short presentation, and I hope that this gave you a good update of where we are and our different activities to trigger more private financing for energy efficiency. Thanks.
Thank you, Timothy. Just a quick reminder, yes, we will post the presentation on our website, and so everybody can access the links and the information. And second, if you would like to send us questions, you can use the chat room, the chat option in the webinar. And now we are going to introduce our next panelist. It's Daniel Magallón. He is the CEO of the Basel Agency for Sustainable Finance, and he will be introducing us to the energy savings insurance model. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Paola, and thank you for inviting me to present this model. BASE is a Swiss organization, and we are dedicated to develop innovative financing instruments and business models to scale up investments in sustainable energy. So we were founded in 2001, and since, I would say, 15 years, we have been working with banks and financial institutions trying to scale up investments in energy efficiency. And one of the learnings from these years have been that even when energy efficiency presents very attractive investment opportunities, especially for enterprises in buildings and other opportunities, normally these type of investments are not a priority investment. And especially for SMEs, which are the biggest share of the market when we are talking about enterprises. One of the issues related with not being a priority is that normally companies tend to invest in growth, in producing more, in selling more, not necessarily investing in savings. Another learning from these years have been that all the investors, all these enterprises tend to evaluate their investment opportunities in terms of risk return. So if they perceive a very high risk in any kind of investment, they have very high returns expectations. And in the same way, if they have low risk perceptions, the expected return also is low. So I put this graphic here where it's showing 3 different types of investment opportunities. If you don't want any risk, you put your money in a bank account, in a saving account that is very low, but also the return is low. And then if you want a higher risk, you go to the stock market, and obviously your return expectations are quite high. And the investors and the companies, they understand very well the risk return on their core business. So the problem with energy efficiency is that normally it's perceived as a very high risk investment, and the risk return trade-off is not competing with their other investment opportunities. So the whole program is aiming to reduce that risk perception to a level that is very low, and that risk return trade-off becomes very attractive and more competitive to the other investment opportunities that an enterprise has. So the model basically is based in 4 pillars, in four mechanisms. We have a financing mechanism, which is not something that is not very strange or weird from what it has been applied at the moment. And then we have 3 other components, which is an insurance, a contract, and a validation mechanisms, and I'm going to explain each of them. So when we were start launching this program 3 years ago in Colombia, we realized that neither the client, meaning the enterprise, or the technology providers that were used to deal with energy efficiency. The client was not used to buy future energy saving promises, and neither the provider. So it was very difficult for them to when try to guarantee the energy savings. One of the first things that we decided to do was to try to help them and put in place a contract, a standardized contract that basically reflects in a very simple way how to guarantee the energy savings from these type of projects. One of the elements that we put in place was a guarantee. I'm going to talk a little bit about the guarantee later. First, let's go to the next slide to talk about the flow of financing, just to show you that it's not something weird. So we have a bank that is lending money to an enterprise, and then we have an enterprise that is signing a contract with a technology provider. And on the right side, you will see a circle, which is the energy efficiency project, which there's an expectation to deliver some energy savings. In the left side, we have two elements. We have normally in some of these countries where we apply this model, we have some instruments that reduce the risk for the bank. In some cases, we have a credit guarantee. In most of the countries, it's already an instrument that is available. And we have incorporated an insurance where the beneficiary is the enterprise. It's not the bank. It's a company. It's a investor, and the idea is to cover the risk, the performance risk of the energy efficiency project. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in a later slide. So the next slide, please. This is about the contract. So this is a standard contract, a turnkey contract. And what we have been doing is just to include some clauses that somehow guarantee the energy savings. And one of these elements, for example, is a retention guarantee. So the retention guarantee, basically, what it is a percentage of the total value of the project that is retained from to the provider. And the idea is that the provider shows a little bit of commitment or to share of the risk of this kind of project. So normally the retention guarantee is equivalent to the 10% of the total value of the project. So that means that the provider receives 90% of the total value at the beginning in order that he can install the equipment, and 10% is retained and is returned to the provider as soon as the project starts demonstrating that it achieves the energy efficiency promised. In this graphic, you can see two scenarios. The first scenario, the left column, it says that 35% of were promised of energy savings by the provider, and the project achieved 40% of energy savings. So the project was okay. So that means that a portion of these 10% of the retention is returned to the provider. In the second scenario, again, we have a promised energy saving of 35%, and then the project only delivered 30%. So that means that there is a damage to the client of 5%, which is paid from the retention guarantee. So basically what we are trying to do is that the client sees that the provider is putting some skin on the game on this kind of projects or commitment. There's a second element, which is insurance. It's the next slide, where basically I'm going to explain it with examples. So again, the provider promised 35% of energy savings. It was a very bad project, so it only achieved 10% of energy savings. So that means that the client has a damage of 25%. We have a retention guarantee that we can use to compensate to the client. But in the case that it's not enough money to compensate to the client, and that the provider is not willing to compensate the additional money from his pocket, then the insurance will pay to the client the difference. So the idea is that the client perceives that he's going to receive the energy savings always. So returning to the first graphic that we saw about risk return, we are with the contract, the retention, and now the insurance, what we are doing is to decrease the risk perception of the client. We have a third element here, which is the next slide, which is a validation mechanism. The main role of the validation mechanism is work basically as an arbitration activity. So we know that there's going to be some disagreements at some point between the client and the provider regarding the energy savings. So it might be that after 1 or 2 year period, the client says, you know, the provider says that it achieved the energy savings, that he wants back his retention, and the client might say that no, that he paid more energy in that year, so he needs to be compensated. So it is established in the contract the role of an independent validation entity, which will work as a referee and will help to will help in this dispute by evaluating who is right in these reports. And that figure becomes quite important, not only for the client and the provider, but also now for the insurance company, given that they become kind of the technical eyes of the insurance company. So that figure is quite important in the model. So as you can see, these three mechanisms, the insurance, the contract, and the validation mechanism become the main legs of the program. This is a program that started 2 years ago in Colombia, and then was awarded by the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance as one of the most innovative instruments to scale up energy efficiency. And since then, we have been scaling up the model in different places with the support of the Danish government and the Inter-American Development Bank. We are replicating this in 6 countries in Latin America, and also has attracted attention from other multilateral and bilateral entities, such as the French Development Agency and the GIZ, which is the Development Agency of Germany. And also now we are working with a private bank in Mongolia, helping them to build their energy efficiency financing strategy using this model. Since the beginning of the year, we have been structuring this model to be replicated in Europe. So we have done an analysis on which countries make sense to start piloting this. And we identified Italy, Portugal, and Spain as countries with a very high and interesting potential for energy efficiency and for the energy saving insurance model. And we have been discussing this model with different insurance companies and banks that are interested in piloting this with us. So what we are looking is to explore with banks some potential interest and collaboration in these 3 countries, and also with insurance companies. We are discussing the potential to develop this. What we know at the moment is that we have a huge market. 99% of the enterprises in Italy, Portugal, and Spain are SMEs. And this program is focused in SMEs. So I'm going to stop here. If you have any question, I will be very happy to answer the questions.
Thank you, Daniel. I think we're going to keep the questions for the end because we still have a couple of more interesting initiatives to hear about. So the next is Luca Bertalot, the Secretary General of the European Mortgage Federation and the European Covered Bond Council. Luca, your turn.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to present our initiative, and good morning to everyone. Very briefly, I would like to introduce our initiative. We can move to slide 2. The aim of this initiative is trying to implement best practices in Europe, which can help banks to free capital for energy efficiency. We believe that energy efficiency can play an important role in risk mitigation for the banks and improve the robustness and the financial stability in their balance sheet. That's is our entry point in order to push a kind of a revolution in the entire value chain, in order to highlight the passages where there is energy efficiency, and at the end of this path, ask the European Commission to ensure a capital discount relief for mortgages which present those characteristics inside. We think, and maybe we can go to slide number 2, please, number 3, please, that there are two major impacts on the balance sheet of the bank. Is that energy efficiency can improve the capacity of the borrower to repay their mortgages. So the disposable income will be increased by the fact that the energy bill will be made lighter, and also that the property can be enhanced by making energy efficiency renovation. These two very simple factors can trigger an enormous amount of risk mitigant in the balance sheet of the banks. If this risk mitigation is captured by reducing the capital charge for risk of the banks, we believe that banks can be incentivized to dedicate more attention in their business line to energy efficiency product, namely the energy efficiency mortgages. This is not the only factors that we can consider that can trigger attention for the banks, because we see that this process can incentivize the reputational value of the banks, can introduce and improve funding costs for the banks, because those green mortgages can be included in a green securitization, green cover bonds, or green senior unsecured. I can present better characteristics than the normal funding tool used today, ensuring more liquidity and reducing funding costs. So all in all, I think we see a big interest for banks to step in this business. The problem is that we have to make sure that a group of pilot banks will be able to modify their business line in order to ensure that we can move as a pan-European initiative and make sure that the major markets will be able to present the same product at the same time. For us, this is an asset because this will impact three major agendas of the European Commission. First of all, will improve the balance sheet of the banks, as I said, implementing risk mitigation. So from a financial stability point of view, will improve the capacity of banks to be resilient to the next crisis. Secondly, will improve the capacity of the Union to improve growth and new jobs, because this implementation of best practices will produce new jobs and will facilitate access to SME to renovation business. And then third, will improve energy efficiency. So it's absolutely aligned with the energy efficiency agenda of the European Commission and the implementation of the COP21 parameters. The major parameter for the implementation of this win-win process is the modification of the major risk parameters, which is the loan-to-value for banks. So if the banks will improve their property valuation, modifying valuers techniques, modifying their way on how the value is of the property is captured from an IT perspective, they can play around with the loan to value. I'm in slide 6, sorry. They can play around on the loan to value and increase the risk mitigation of their portfolio. If we move to slide 7, please. This will require a modification of the process by which mortgages are produced. And we would like to facilitate the process of implementation of this energy efficiency factor in the value chain of the banks by offering a common way in Europe on how valuation has to be effectuated and how the energy efficiency factor will be captured. So every single citizen will be aware that by improving their house, they can benefit of free money coming from public sector, a reduction in the mortgage fees, and also will benefit from an improvement of the quality of the property. We think that this will be the real trigger to move every single citizen to move forward and start to renovate their house. I would like to recall that 40% of the pollution in Europe is coming from the ménage, from the building stocks. So the challenge for the European Union will be to convince every single citizen to make works of renovation in their house. So if we create a green incentive for everyone to step in a renovation, we will ensure a better improvement of the building stocks in Europe. Just to give you some numbers, in Europe we have more than 500 million citizens, 250 million of dwellings, and we have to convince all these citizens to find resources to improve the quality of their buildings. If we move to the next slide, please. We have designed a new value chain, which will be adopted by a few banks. Our initiative will be based on a pilot phase. We are redesigning this value chain in a way that all the banks will have a clear guidelines by the end of this year. And we are asking banks to start to modify their value chain at the beginning of next year, in order to make sure that we will have around 12, 15 banks that can implement this product at the same time all over Europe. In order to bridge the gap between nothing and capital cost reduction in the coming years, we are investigating if the European Investment Fund and the European Investment Bank can grant a special guarantee to the mortgages that will be produced following this kind of new common strategy in Europe. That's it, Paola. I would like to stop here because I think that I use all my 8 minutes, so I don't want to take advantage of the time for the others. If you have any questions, I'm at your complete disposal for any kind of questions.
Thank you, Luca. Yes, and thank you for speeding up a little bit your presentation. The questions, we can keep them for the end if somebody wants to do them, or address them directly to Luca eventually. And so our next presentation is from our colleague Martin Schoenberg, and he's the coordinator for the energy efficiency finance work. And go ahead, Martin.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to present to you the G20 Energy Efficiency Investment Toolkit. This is a G20 product which has been developed by UNEP together with the International Partnership for Energy Efficiency Cooperation and the International Energy Agency, which was recently launched at the G20 Energy Efficiency Forum in Hamburg. It's essentially, if you go to the next slide, it's essentially a set of best practices. So what we try to do is we try to essentially bring together the perspective of investors, banks, insurance companies, as well as G20 governments. And this product has actually been reviewed by these constituencies, and it provides best practice solutions for advancing energy efficiency investment across the project, as we call it now, the project chain. So essentially, actually, if you go to the next slide, which has a nice overview of the toolkit. So basically it brings together, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So basically it looks at investment levels in its first chapter, and it finds that already the energy efficiency investment market is quite significant. So it's at 221 billion. I mean, of course, it's still not, and this is annual new investment. So of course, it's still not on the level that would be required in order to address climate objectives, but it is a significant chunk of overall investment. And if you look at it, it actually is now pretty much on par with renewable energy investment, and as well as investment to grids. So you can see that pretty much, at least in the electricity sector, most of the new investment is now going into low carbon alternatives. And also when you look at the investment levels, you can see that most of it is actually in buildings, followed by transport and then industry. So you can see that a significant chunk of the investment is already flowing into buildings. However, one of the challenges when tracking energy efficiency investments is the fact that there's core investment, which is essentially self-financed investment. So this is the one that's in a way the easiest to track. This is basically investment done by energy service companies. And you can see that's only a small chunk of the overall investment level. So it's roughly 20 to 30 billion every year. And then what's not as easily trackable and also not as visible to investors is the integrated investment. So this is when, for example, a building refurbishment gets done, or and this building refurbishment gets done maybe for other reasons than energy efficiency. However, it has energy efficiency benefits, or for example, in industry, when new equipment is being purchased or new appliances are being purchased, and these appliances then often have a higher energy efficiency standard. However, the reason those appliances are being purchased is not energy efficiency. So that's why it's very difficult to track those. And but altogether, we had 221 billion. Of course, the potential of inefficient assets is much higher. So there's still a large need for action. So if you go to the next slide. So what we did basically, we brought together, as I said, policy. So we had we basically tracked progress in the implementation, what's called the energy efficiency investment principles, which were agreed and endorsed by the G20 a few years ago. And we tracked progress in all of those principles and checked in each country by means of case studies how much progress is being made and where there might be additional needs for deep dives. And then, of course, also, which is the most relevant for here, we have a private finance section, which essentially brings together best practices for banks, institutional investors, and insurance companies. And we also have a public finance section, which essentially brings about a set of commitments by public development banks so that they can play their catalytic role in advancing energy efficiency investment further. If you go to the next slide. So this is an overview of what's in the toolkit. I apologize, it's a very busy slide, but it really does bring together everything that's in the toolkit. So you can see that the main objective is to go from essentially inefficient assets, so the US dollar trillions of untapped energy efficiency potentials, mainstreaming that into banking operations, insurance, and investment practices, and then also enabling, of course, the core energy efficiency investments being done by companies, project hosts, and so on. And you can see on the slide that there's a significant amount of measures that each of these constituencies can take, and they pretty much reflect what Luca and Base were saying. So you can see several elements here. For example, also something that is very important, I'll talk about it a little bit more on the next slide, is in banking operations, the importance of green tagging. So basically tracking energy efficiency, financing activity, and also, of course, the importance of doing a similar, likewise tracking energy efficiency investments for investors and the role of insurance companies in de-risking. But if you go to the next slide, I can talk about it in more detail. So basically, we did a survey last year, which surveyed, I think, quite a few of you as well, plus some additional banks, and we found out that energy efficiency is now a well-recognized opportunity. So there's really growing awareness amongst the surveyed banks that energy efficiency is something that needs to be of key importance. However, internally, it still needs awareness raising and supportive policies. And the key thing that came out of the survey is that it requires the tracking of energy efficiency finance. So when you look to the right side of the slide, you can see that only less than half of the banks that we surveyed actually track the energy efficiency performance. And of course, that then makes it very difficult to assess which contribution banks are already making. However, the contribution is significant, but it is very difficult to track, as I said, again, because the majority of these financing activities are essentially integrated into other lending practices. And then what the tool can also showcases is the G20 Energy Efficiency Investor Statement, which has been around for a few months now, but we are now at more than 4 trillion of energy efficiency investor support. So this is the aggregated AUM of the investors backing it. So it's a significant core group of energy efficiency investors, which is expanding further. And then finally, what we have in the toolkit for the first time is a reference to the role of insurance companies as well. So as also was said by Base, there are two risks that insurance companies can address. The one is technical risks. So this is essentially when the risk involved in, for example, installing new equipment or also the coordination of various actors. So if you, for example, in a building, if you do building improvement works, there's a need for coordinating the various craftsmen who are going to be conducting the works and so on. And all this can be, and we have quite a few case studies in that section, which I recommend you read, which essentially shows that insurance companies have a very important role to play. And then, of course, also the role of insurance companies and ensuring financial and performance risks. And ultimately, what a lot of these activities do is that they free up resources on the balance sheets of the project hosts, and therefore enable the project hosts to do even further investments. So for that reason, the role of insurance companies is actually quite important. Next slide. And I think that's my final slide. Is essentially for the first time in the toolkit, we also have a statement by development banks. Essentially, what we found out is that development banks, of course, have a key catalytic role, as I said. It's in the showcasing and replication of energy efficiency investment models. It's also in the identification and implementation of new financial instruments, and of course, the development of internal policies that mainstream energy efficiency investment. So the AFD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EIB, KfW, and so on have come together. And the AIIB, they have come together to basically support 4 key actions, which are to increase policy-based lending. So this is very good. This is an upscaling of energy efficiency lending activity by the development banks. It's also increasing the amount, availability, and simplicity of technical assistance and project development assistance facilities. Then using their relationships with their clients, so their retail distribution mechanisms, in order to raise awareness about energy efficiency. And finally, considering the important role in sort of the integration of energy efficiency with mobility, smart grids, and infrastructure. So this is still a sort of core group of banks. We hope that it will expand further going forward. And the reason for that is also, if you go to the next slide, that we have quite a few workshops coming up. So we launched, as I said, the G20 Toolkit in Hamburg. It was then also presented at the EE Global, which is the main energy efficiency event in North America. So we had a launch there, and we also had a great launch of the toolkit at the Clean Energy Ministerial in Beijing, where we partnered with the National Development and Reform Commission of China. So this is, as you know, essentially the economics ministry of China, and we had a very busy launch of it there, attended by roughly, I think, 160 or 200 participants. So it was really a major event, and this brought together again policymakers and financial institutions. So it was a really successful outcome. We have also been requested by several G20 governments to present the toolkit to them in technical engagement workshops, and that will also mean that we, of course, will be able to engage with UNEP members in those regions that have requested these technical engagement workshops. So we are looking forward to implementing the toolkit going forward.
Thank you, Martin. Now we're gonna go back to UNEP activities, and let me introduce you Lisa Van Ass. She's our signatory relationships manager, and she's gonna announce our regional roundtable for this year in Europe.
Hi everyone. So this year, the launch of our regional roundtables in all 5 regions will really be a place to mark the fact that this is also a very special year for UNEP and for sustainable finance, in that it's our 25-year anniversary. So at each of our regional roundtables, we'll be celebrating some of the progress made in sustainable finance during that period, and of course also recognizing some of the members who've been part of that journey over the past 25 years, including some of the original members from 1992, back when we were launched. So the regional roundtables will be taking place between September and December this year. The Europe Regional Roundtable will be from the 16th to the 18th of October. And it's really a couple of things. It builds on the global roundtable that happens every 2 years. So our next global roundtable would be in 2018. And it's really to bring it to a more regional context, the momentum around sustainable finance. So to look at what is actually happening around implementation within Europe specifically, and of course making the connections to the global developments in sustainable finance. It's really a mix of high levels, looking at thought leadership in sustainable finance, combined with more practical technical sessions. So looking at what are the practitioners actually doing to implement environmental social governance factors and develop sustainable financial products and work towards becoming sustainable financial institutions. So it's a mix of workshops and plenary and panel sessions. We're working on the draft agenda at the moment, and your input is very welcome to help shape the agenda. If you would like to participate in the event as speakers or have an exhibition booth, or if you'd just like to let us know what you would like to hear about, is there a specific speaker you'd like to hear from? Is there a specific topic that you'd like to hear covered at the event? The first day, the 16th, will be much more for UNEP members in specific activities. So it's more around workshops, the banking and investment industry meetings, property working group meeting, and we also will hold a session on family offices and wealth management and looking at how they are contributing or can contribute more to scaling up innovative financing. In the evening on the 16th, we'll be having our 25th anniversary celebration. So you're all welcome to join for an evening of hearing from some of those thought leaders over the past years and celebrating progress amongst UNEP members and beyond membership over the past 25 years. On the 17th, this will be the main day of high-level speakers and plenary sessions, with the opening looking at the role of sustainable finance in a changing European landscape. So really, what is the role of sustainable finance in Europe as it stands today, and what are the current emerging issues in Europe, and what are the initiatives that are helping to drive sustainable finance in the region. We'd also be looking at what progress has been made by financial institutions themselves in sustainable finance, and in particular looking at UNEP's new dashboard, which is being developed at the moment to benchmark financial institutions to really see how far have they really come on sustainability at an institutional level, and what does leadership look like, and what do those who have not yet achieved sustainability across the institutions need to do in order to make more progress. The 17th will also be the AGM, which all members are also invited to. And we'll have a dialogue with regulators and policymakers, including the high-level expert group on sustainable finance from the European Commission, to look at what's happening in that group. And we'll have a series of parallel sessions, and these will be more technical, where we'll look at what exactly is happening within the membership, within the different work streams of UNEP. So the climate change project, how members are implementing the principles for sustainable insurance, specifically within Europe, positive impact finance on catalyzing financing for the sustainable development goals, the Natural Capital Finance Alliance projects on, for example, advancing environmental risk management and developing guidance to supplement the Natural Capital Protocol, and also looking at energy efficiency in Europe, which of course you've heard about today to some extent, and looking at social issues. So we have a new social issue strategy building on the human rights tool that already has been developed, and also going beyond that to look at what members are doing around issues such as social inclusion. And we'll also have some other lightning rounds, which are really, again, technical sessions looking at very practical tools and how the different work streams are developing innovation and research and development to advance the way that environmental issues and social issues are integrated into financial products and services. On the 18th, this will be again for specific groups. So in which Berkane will hold an insurance market event with insurance members. The Positive Impact Working Group will meet. So those who are involved in Positive Impact will have a chance to sit face to face and go through some of the challenges and developments around the working groups. The Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures Working Group, which is a group of banks working on complying with the TCFD recommendations, will be meeting to explore how the methodologies can be developed. and it will be the Global Steering Committee meeting on the 18th. We're partnering with Swiss Sustainable Finance for the Europe Regional Roundtable in Geneva. And there are other sponsorship opportunities available. So if you're interested, and also, of course, you would have branding, exhibition space, and so on, then let us know. We can send you further details. And yeah, so as I say, contact myself or Paula to give us suggestions for the agenda, or if you'd like to participate in other ways or as speakers. And if you'd like to sponsor, please get in touch. And we hope to see you all then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone, and I hope it was not too much information, all in 1 hour. And as I said earlier, I hope to hear from you. We hope to hear from you. UNEPify is really, our value is what we can bring you to improve sustainability. So thank you, everyone.